So after a short 1 week break of no JoJo's Bizarre Adventure after they took a little week off, probably to get the production in line, making sure they don't have to drop the quality, so we got a little recap episode, we're back with the next big part to this JoJo story. And I have to say, I was very, very surprised with this part because for how it was starting off, it was very simple, very comfy, a lot of planning and structuring for how to get the boss's identity. So I was like, okay, this will be more of a setup episode. That's perfectly acceptable. This part has been very exciting, jaw-dropping. If they want to go more peaceful with this and more setup, I'm fine with that. So when we get introduced to Talking Heads and Clash, holy shit was I surprised. But first things first, I have to mention, on the topic of Clash, every JoJo part that has legal subtitles, so it's licensed by an official translator like someone like Crunchyroll, they always have to change the stand names. They share the same name as something that's copyright protected, so band names, and it seems like this author really loves his band names. So bands like Talking Heads or Clash or, Aerosmith, they have to change the subtitles to be something different, otherwise they would have to license the band's name, and that's a very pricey thing. And for JoJo, there's a lot of licensing they'd have to do, so they have to change it. That annoys some people, and it can be a little jarring when you read something and then the sounds that they're saying is completely opposite. This episode, however, we have Clash, but the way the characters were saying it sounded like Crash, which is what the subtitle said, and I was kind of like, okay, Crash, that doesn't sound like a band. And then it wasn't until like the second or third time they said it, I was like, oh shit, they're actually saying Clash, it just sounds like the actual new subtitle. Now, it's completely random and it's not that important, but I thought it was very interesting that for the first time in a JoJo part where they actually changed the stands names for the subtitles, it still sounds like what they're saying, so it doesn't really feel that jarring when they're saying it. At least that's how I felt. But in terms of what was happening in this episode, it was fun. And I will mention it, I do like the new opening and ending. I have a feeling a lot of people aren't going to latch onto the new opening the same way they did the first opening, which I think is to be expected because when you have the two people who created the Ava opening reuniting after all these years to create a JoJo opening, it's going to be very hard to match that. But I did like the interesting direction they went with it. I thought visually it was directed really well, a lot of cool shots. And the song, it didn't get me hyped up like past JoJo songs, but honestly, I thought it was very cool to kind of make it so different from the last, which honestly, JoJo openings have been pretty distinct overall, and I thought it was a nice way to get us into the last core of JoJo. Personally, okay with the opening song. I think it's very catchy. I don't think I'm gonna skip it. I mean, granted, I might down the line, but I think similar to the last opening, I'm gonna watch it every single week, and the ending song as well, I really, really enjoyed. In terms of the content, like I said, it was a lot of setup, a lot of preparation, and I like how Trish is kind of rising up here and being like, I'm going to give you all the information I have, and I want to see this through to the end, because the boss is a secretive man. He's keeping his identity safe, and, we got people like Bruno being like, this guy's invincible. No matter what we throw, no matter who throws an attack at him, he can just erase it. He can manipulate time to bend to his will, essentially. The only way that we could stop this is if we can get his identity, and then we can send Hitman out. Like, seriously, it's so perfect. The boss can hide in the shadows in plain sight because no one knows who he is, and that's what's really terrifying about this villain. He's such a disturbing character who has such a disturbing and overpowered ability, but because he keeps his identity secret, because he has this impossible stand, essentially he's indestructible unless you can get his identity. And we got some stuff with Bruno going on, like Giorno realizing that shit's not right, he was dead, he's still here, but he's not bleeding or getting hurt. He's trying to piece shit together, but I do like how Giorno isn't just some cliche protagonist being like, we gotta figure this out now. He's like, no, I'm smart. I realize that bringing this up right now isn't the best time, especially when we got assassins out to get us. So when that sequence started to play out where we have our characters eating a nice lunch, it seems pretty peaceful, and things were getting a little weird. At first, and this is something I really like with this JoJo part, is how when we get introduced to the enemy stand, I love how unnerving, how it's very confusing to figure out what it is that's truly happening. Because at first, when I saw this stand, I was like, it looks like almost like metal is being manipulated. Like the spoon was there and then wasn't. And then when he picks up the spoon, it's like kind of gnawed off. I thought it was someone manipulating the metal and like a knife was going to go through his throat. That's what I like about the stands in this part, is when they introduce them, they'll lead you onto believing one thing. And then when you learn what it is they're actually doing, it's a really nice surprise and makes sense with what was truly happening. So what was actually happening with Clash was essentially we got this remote control stand that essentially can jump from liquid to liquid to liquid, and was just making Narnacha a complete and utter bitch to this stand. And this episode was truly annoying in the sense that you felt as disturbed and as pissed off as this character, and I say annoying as a compliment. This is the only time I think I remember an anime annoying me, but I love that feeling, because essentially these characters have no reason to think he's being controlled because he just seems so weird. He's trying to say one thing or point here and just nothing's lining up. It seems like he's just pulling their leg and it pisses them off. The only one who's kind of cluing it is Giorno, but still, it doesn't feel like he's being controlled. It just feels like, he's luring them around and kind of being a jokester, which kind of would fit to his character. And I love how, while this character is getting pissed off that he can't say what he wants, that when he's saying, like, don't go in the water, he'll point and say, don't go over there. That's what he does. He's completely and utterly pissed off at himself that he can't fight back, and so too is the viewer. That feeling of being annoyed is something that you appreciate because you're like, I really wish could just say something or someone could clue into what's going on, but you don't blame any of the characters. We got one guy essentially being controlled and being hunted by this like little stand that shouldn't be anything but is actually such a deadly device, while we have our other characters kind of being like, we don't know what you're saying. So you're saying you have a fish, but he's actually like this big, he's super slow, like what are you doing to us? There's no real reason for these characters to believe that he was being controlled up till that point, because it was only a couple of minutes and it seemed like he was goofing off. So that's what I really like about that sequence, is it was such a terrifying scene because it kind of felt hopeless, similar to when we were fighting the boss, because you can see how they could defeat it if he could just talk or actually point out what's going on, because they have the manpower, but it's only going after one person at a time, and there's no way to see it because of the speed. And Talking Head just kind of being like, literally controlling the tongue, that was ridiculous, and I loved it. I love how these two stands really complement the other, so when you're going against one person, and you're trying to make the group very confused and lead them to either a really good area full of water so he can really make use of the stand, it was a really nice way to make a dual stand fight really feel terrifying, because it really wasn't a fight, it was more of a massacre over a very slow period of time. It was like Jaws, if it was actually scary. That's what I like about that. It's like when they introduce stands, you don't know what the hell's going on unless you're at the manga, but then as the episode gets going, and sometimes you gotta wait a week before you even really understand what's going on, but then when you get the understanding of why he couldn't talk, why he couldn't point, you're like, oh, this makes a whole lot of sense. He's being controlled, he's being hunted, and just that build up to Giorno kind of figuring out what's going on. He's piecing it together, but he still doesn't know exactly what's happening, and then you just see that brutal bite. This part is terrifying, it's exciting, it's exhilarating, and that's what's so great about it. The stands have so much thought and meaning put behind them, and the way they structure these massacres, these hunts, this battle is so damn flawless, and I don't know where it will go next week, and that's very, very exciting. It can be easy to forget that our characters are gang members. They aren't really morally righteous characters, they are gang members, and this episode has a very hilarious moment where we got a guy, just a casual civilian, being like, hey, you spilt wine on my white coat, you're an asshole, pay for it. Which is, he's a dick, but seriously, if that coat was really that much money, you can understand the rage. And because they're all on edge thinking they're being hunted, they just beat the guy. It was hilarious and disturbing that we just got these gang members. Sure, they feel bad afterwards, and then you'll just be like, give him some food to kind of make sure it's not poison, or, he'll be fine. I'm sure the stain from the wine will come out even though he's covered in blood. These are totally gang members, and I love it how they can do something that kind of seems righteous, take out the corrupt boss, put someone better in charge, but still, they are a gang, and it can be easy to forget that, which is why I love episodes and just parts like these where it really highlights who they truly are. Visually, I thought it was a very fun episode. There was a lot of shots where you'll see a bunch of characters on screen at one time, and they'll frame it in a different way each time, so it's not just the same, here's a few rectangles and put the characters' faces. They'll spice it up and keep it interesting. I always love shots like that where they make it so you'll see all the characters' reactions, but in an interesting way that was different from the last. Voice acting wise was really awesome, especially when you have a character whose tongue just got cut off. I like how you can't really make out what he's saying, but that's kind of what you hope to hear. The voice acting's always fun, the music pretty on point as well. There's a couple of wider shots where there was some under-detailed faces that you could kind of point out and say, oh, that looked a little sloppy, but the core content to this episode looked goddamn amazing, and you appreciate that David Production is taking the time to take those week breaks so they don't have to look gross or disturbing. This was an exciting episode. There's so much that we are anticipating. What's going on with Bruno? What's going on with the boss? Who the boss truly is in terms of their identity? Where they'll go after Venice in terms of going to the hometown, seeing if they can figure out what was erased and why Trish forgot everything. there is so much that they're building up to, but then you'll get these stand users who are just terrifying in their own right and are equally dangerous as the boss given this circumstance, because they work so well together that they can control a person and take them out when they least expect it, and make this very strong group a bunch of bitches when you got two remote control stands. That's why remote control stands are so terrifying, is when they work together hand in hand like this. How do you defeat that? And that's really cool. I'm very excited to see how Giorno will deal with it. Yes, Giorno does have the ability to repair bodies, so you can say the true point of sacrifice is kind of like gone, but at the same time, it takes time to repair a tongue. It takes time to repair a slash to the neck. These characters still can die, but just if they do survive a battle, they now don't have to be limbless, which I actually think is a pretty cool mechanic. Some people might think it removes the sense of threat, but I personally really appreciate it. This episode was very good, very exciting. For being an episode I thought would be pretty simple, it was goddamn incredible and very intense. Holy hell, how are these characters going to get out of this? Especially because they have a bed of water next to them. I don't know, but I'm excited to see more. Let me know, for manga readers, how was this adaptation? Anime originals like myself, what did you think of these two very intense stands? Let me know down in that comment section below. And remember to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. But until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.